Onward we go with adolescence. So, adolescence is a period that begins with puberty and ends with the transition to adulthood, approximately 10 to 18. But again, these are arbitrary. I generally think about it more like 11 to 17. But again, that's just my personal opinion. The book says 10 to 18. Again, that's just to show you that all these stages are essentially arbitrary, but there are some commonalities, across these age groups as we develop developmental stages that we all kind of go through. And adolescence is that big one where our identity is starting to form and we're coming into who we are and we can think abstractly and we're getting all kinds of smart and we're becoming all kinds of social. And then our bodies start going wild on us. So, again, physical changes associated with puberty are triggered by hormones. Again, girls tend to start a little bit before boys. Changes happen at different rates in distinct parts of the brain and increase adolescents' propensity for risky behavior. They're always talking about adolescents' risky behavior, but we're going to be getting into what happens. But again, the glands, get triggered, and all of a sudden, the hormones start kicking in. This is all just built into us. But this process involves cognitive changes that include improvements in complex and abstract thought, which again, I keep pointing out that if anything that stands out to me with adolescence is that ability, to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, to step outside the box, to reflect. This is when they can really start to do it. Adolescents' relationships with parents tend to go through a period of redefinition in which the adolescents become autonomous. And again, they've been doing this for a while. They've been going to school for a while, but now they're starting to figure out how the world works. They can walk down the street by themselves. They start to drive cars. It's odd. They're going to parties. They're out with their friends. Peer relationships become a very important source of support during this time. But companionship during adolescence can promote problem behaviors. Depending on who they're hanging around with and whether or not they're interacting, whether they even make friends, it can cause, there's so much to think about here. But again, identity formation is also occurring during this time as adolescents explore and commit to different roles and ideological positions in their life. Sorry, let me fix this, my bad. I meant to do this initially. There we go. Thank you for your patience. So, physical development in adolescence period. Puberty is a period of rapid growth and sexual maturation. These changes begin sometimes between, again, 8 and 14. Every kid is a little bit different. And so, again, a lot of it's just based on genetics. A lot of it's based upon levels of fat. For example, like, why do gymnasts tend to start puberty a little bit later? And again, because a girl's body has to have so much level of fat before it even becomes triggered. And again, I like to have that conversation when it comes to things like body image, because again, what is the ideal female body image? And then what is a healthy body image? And those two tend to be very far from each other. But again, girls' puberty starts generally around age 10 and boys about 2 years later. This process of puberty takes about 3 to 4 years to complete. Adolescents during this time experience a physical growth spurt. The growth proceeds from the extremities toward the torso. And, as we talked about early on, that's just the way it goes from the center to the out. This is referred to as distal proximal development. Tons of physical development and sex differences occur at this time. Sexual development is also occurring where primary sexual characteristics involve changes in the reproductive organs. Developing earlier in modern times. Children are developing earlier in modern times, and you have to ask why. And again, it's the social context, it's the access to nutrition and things along those lines. And then you got to ask questions like, why do blacks tend to start beforehand, then it's Hispanics, then whites, then Asians? Is it because of race, or is race a spurious factor? Is it actually due to things like diet and poverty levels? What happens when you stick entire races of people in poverty? How does that affect their overall levels of nutrition, levels of fat, things along those lines that are associated with joining in puberty? Okay. The book has a couple sections about some of the negative effects, and this got me asking all kinds of questions. But it started talking about the mental health problems that are associated with children during the time with puberty. This also talks really specifically about what happens to those that start puberty first? It's like, for example, girls, they found that early puberty with girls is associated with depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, disruptive behaviors, and earlier sexual behavior. And again, I had to ask myself why. Why is this the case? What is it that girls that enter puberty first are experiencing that's causing these problems? And so there's a lot of questions that came about. Is it the social context? Are they being taunted by their peers because maybe they don't look like everybody else? Or is it that they're getting exposure in attention from boys, and then that makes them uncomfortable? Is it a mindset thing, like they have the mind of a child but their body is growing? Or is it that their body is growing and now they have a more adult-like mindset and they're kind of getting away from their childlike peers? Again, there's all kinds of questions here, but early maturing girls demonstrate more anxiety and less confidence in relationships with family and friends, and they tend to compare themselves more negatively to their peers, which is strange. Why is this happening? Problems with early puberty seem to be due to the mismatch between a child's appearance and the way she thinks and acts. Adults assume the child's more capable, so they let the girl go out in the world, and then if the girl's going out in the world too soon, are they experiencing things that are causing problems? Um, for girls, the emphasis on physical attractiveness and sexuality is emphasized at puberty, and they may lack effective coping strategies to deal with the tension they get from older boys. And additionally, mental health problems are more likely to occur when the child is among the first in his or her peer group to develop. And again, I just kept asking why. And it's again, this is a time where you don't want to be different. You want to look like your peers. You don't want to stand out from everybody else. And so how is this affecting them? There's just all kinds of questions that we have to ask. For boys also see changes in their emotional functioning in puberty. While most boys experience a decrease in depressive symptoms during puberty, boys who began puberty early exhibited rapid tempo or fast rate of change, actually increased in depressive symptoms. So again, you're starting to see the negative effects for early puberty also for boys. So again, that's a cohort that we could help in some way. The effects of pubertal tempo were stronger than those of pubertal timing, so says the book, suggesting that rapid pubertal change in boys may be an important risk factor than the timing of development. So for they're saying for boys, it's not so much that it's the early development, it's just that it comes on so fast and you have these rapid life changes. Both early maturing boys and rapidly maturing boys, though, displayed decrements in their quality of their peer relationships, the increased depression, things along those lines. So, research concluded that transitions in peer relationships may be especially challenging for boys whose maturation is different from others of their age. So, again, what is it with adolescence that wants us to be part of the group? And again, I think that goes back to what I keep talking about is that you're now aware of how other people are thinking of you. And so you're aware of all these subtle little changes that might be going on. How embarrassing is it if you have a cold and you're coughing in a classroom, or if you have a giant zit on your face? Like, why do you care so much? It's built into us to care because of group behavior. It's built into us to work into groups. Sharing is built into our DNA until someone doesn't share with us. We all want to be liked. And so for adolescents, they're out in the social world and they're aware of how other people are thinking of them. And it's just so strong. And they just tend to care a lot, as do we all. And so it tends to affect us how other people are feeling about us. And so you can see where this is having big changes if they feel like they're an outsider because of what they're experiencing and somebody else isn't going through it, for example. Um, the adolescent brain. So the brain undergoes dramatic changes during adolescence. Although it does not get larger, it matures by becoming more interconnected and specialized. Again, as I'm saying, these neural pathways are growing. They're knowledge memory banks of knowledge have just grown extensively. The schemas in their brain are like skyscrapers of knowledge at this point. Their ability to learn, their capacity to learn is on fire. I mean, their dopamine is flying around. They're excited. They're pumped up. Like, this is a big time for the brain changes. And again, it's that outer layer of our evolution, that ability to reflect and think upon the life and, be aware of what's going on in the social context and other people. And then also becoming aware of the self. And then having to like be aware of yourself and then learn how to live as yourself and you don't even know who you are yet. And so you're trying to like live as yourself while you're simultaneously trying to discover who you are as a person. And again, it's a complex time. And so all the old books used to say that, uh, adolescence was a time of like storm and stress or whatever, just pure chaos. But and now we're rethinking this and asking, really, it's just that their brain is on fire. They're becoming very smart. They're growing. They're capable. They're motivated to go out and leave the nest and go seek out the world themselves. And so you're just seeing a lot of changes, but a lot of that comes with just brain growth in general. They're just becoming smart and wise and aware, and they're developing into little adults, essentially, right? Um, this is a time where your brain starts to become more specialized. Your neural pathways, your highways of information are much more efficient at this time. And then the neuroscience of it is that the myelination along those axons grows. Your development of connections between neurons grows and it becomes more efficient, right? So it's like if you shoot basketballs over and over and over again, the neural pathways responsible in the brain for getting your body to shoot basketballs accurately becomes more fast and efficient. And this is the same process that's going across your brain. As adolescents develop more skills and fine tune their skills and get better at math, science, reading, art, moving their bodies, sports, skills, hunting, whatever it might be, that is actually your neural pathways in your brain becoming more efficient, better. You're becoming more wise because your interconnected neurons know how to work better to get your body to do cool stuff in the world, right? So this results in an increase in the white matter of the brain here on the outside of the brain that allows adolescents to make significant improvement in their thinking and processing skills because their brain is growing, their intelligence is growing, their memory banks of knowledge are growing. They can, think back on the knowledge they have in their head to figure out and solve problems in the moment and think about things in the future and begin to again think abstractly. For example, completed installation of the axons consolidates their language skills. But it's at this time, why is it more difficult to learn a language when you get older? Again, this is because your neural pathways have become more fine-tuned. And now they often refer to the idea of like pruning your brain, right? Those unused neural pathways, those links that you don't really use, you go through, you cut those out and you just focus on the important stuff. And so again, that takes away from our plasticity a little bit, our ability for our brain to change. But again, it enables, more efficient neural connectivity and, neural communication, essentially, which means your brain can work better with less. Essentially, your brain can work better with less because you're just more efficient at doing it. So again, your book talks about synaptic pruning. Again, this is going on all the time, especially when you're sleeping. Your brain is organizing information, creating neural pathways that map in your head. It's cutting out the old roads, it's building new roads, okay? The synaptic pruning causes the gray matter of the brain or the cortex to become thinner but more efficient. Again, so you don't have all that wasted space, you're just more efficient at what you're trying to do. You get better at shooting baskets and you don't waste your time on a bunch of crap you don't care about, right? The corpus callosum, right here through the middle of your brain, which connects the two hemispheres, also continues to thicken, allowing for stronger connections between the two areas. So again, your left and right hemisphere can communicate better, become more specialized, like your left hemisphere becomes more identity and language, and your right, more art and things along those lines. And then additionally, in the limbic system, the hippocampus becomes more strongly connected to the frontal lobes, which means your emotion centers are developing and your ability to reflect upon your emotion centers in your outer cortex that talks to the middle part of your brain, the limbic system, is becoming more efficient. So again, adolescents can now reflect on how they're feeling, talk about how they're feeling much more efficiently than they could when they were toddlers, just throwing spasms because their hippocampus was just shooting emotional neurons all over the place. Okay. So they become better at decision making, better at coping, greater integration of memory, greater integration of experiences. I mean, just think your adolescent brain is becoming more efficient, more like a super fast highway. It's like an interstate system instead of some crappy back roads, to try to get somewhere. It's kind of like that, right? Like you're building a super highway of just connected interstates that enable you to travel anywhere you want super fast. And this is totally happening at this time. Like you can really see it when a kid's like, young and middle of childhood, when they're just like so cute, running around, getting all smart, learning their letters, third grade, start doing math and multiplication and division. Um, you know, but by adolescence, they are like big people, right? Big people. So again, the limbic system, that center part of your brain, that's where most of your emotion centers are. Most of your neural pathways go from your emotion centers to your cortex, and then you reflect on your emotions. Like 90% of the neurons go this way from the inside out compared to the outside in. So again, we tend to feel first and then think second. But again, our ability to think about what we're feeling and then act on it becomes more efficient as our emotional intelligence develops, as our neurons and our brains and our body just in general become more used to being human and experiencing these emotions, okay? So the limbic system regulates emotions and reward centers and is linked to the hormonal changes that occur at puberty. And this is why your book is always talking about risk-taking behavior, because this is when the dopamine levels are just flying off the charts and adolescents are seeking out rewards, okay? And sometimes they choose the rewards a little bit more than over the consequences, which is why they call it risky behavior, and their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed for them to make good decision making. So adolescence, this time of storm and stress, which is ridiculous again, but still, it's old school psychology. Why not throw it out there? Um, you're getting just hit with emotions. They're on fire. They're motivated. They're just like driven with emotions when it comes to sex and hunger and food and passion and learning and all this stuff that's going on. I mean, they're just hit with it's all. It's all new. It's fresh. You're not used to it either, right? It's like emotions at first, it takes a lot to cope with that. Think about small children. By the time they're adolescents, they're much better at coping with their emotions. They're not freaking out like kindergartners at school, crying all the time. They do still cry a lot because, we all cry until we suppress it. But at the same time, they're getting better at expressing their emotions and at least using their language skills a little bit better at this time. But again, novelty seeking and a shift toward interacting with their peers occurs at adolescence. They start seeking out rewards, right? I mean, it's built into us to seek out rewards. That's what motivates us to go out and find sex and shelter and warmth and hugs and friends and food and all these things that make us feel good, right? It's built into our biology. So, like, our endocrine system releases hormones into the blood to tell us that we're hungry or we want sex, right? And then our nervous system has a bunch of neurons talking to each other, like, hey man, what do you want? Are you interested in this? Yeah, I want to do that. Let's go do that, right? This is all happening at one time. We're constantly seeking out stimuli, and generally stimuli that makes us feel good, that releases things like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, which makes us feel close to each other and good, right? But the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in the control of these impulses coming out of our limbic system, is not super developed until our mid 20s. And again, I like to ask why. And again, why is our brain so slow at developing that really good, like, higher level decision making, higher functioning decision making? And I would say it's because, like, I mean, if you were thinking straight, how many kids would you end up having? You know what I mean? Like, if you're not thinking, you're like, heck with it, let's just go have babies. But the older you get, like, I'm tired. I don't want to raise any more kids. Oh my God, really? It's, I'm totally joking. But I mean, we all kind of experience that. I've got several kids. I know how I felt when I was younger versus I get older. And I feel like I was a little more jumpy and bouncy when I was in my younger days having kids than I am in my older age here. But again, why? It's because maybe our brain wants us to not think about stuff. Maybe our brain just wants us to go out and act a little bit. And your book talks about that a little bit later on, that, if we didn't have this like motivation coming from our endocrine and nervous system that's driving us to go out and seek stimuli in the social context, Would we ever leave the house? Would we ever leave the comfort of our parents? You know what I mean? So there's 10 years between your adolescent brain just kicking out tons of emotions and then your ability to actually deal with those emotions in a logical way. And so I often joke, like, should we wait till we're 25 to get married? I mean, because are we even making good decisions until we're 25? But that's a good question. I mean, do we really make good decisions till we're 25? Yes, we make good decisions, but they're more informed decisions when we're like 25 years old, okay? So your book says that the approximately 10 years that separate the development of these two brain areas can result in increases in risky behavior, poor decision making because they're seeking rewards and not caring about the consequences, weak emotional control because they're full of emotions, but their ability to reflect on their emotions and cope with their emotions doesn't really come till they're like 25. And so again, teens typically take more risks than adults, and according to research, it's because they weigh risks and rewards differently than adults do because their brains are just functioning a little bit differently than adults do. So, rewards. The brain's sensitivity to the neurotransmitter dopamine, serotonin, etc. peaks during adolescence. Again, we seek out dopamine. That's what makes us feel good. It's involved in reward circuits. When we do things that our brain likes, it releases dopamine. It rewards us. So when you go out and you have sex, when you meet people, when you have good experiences, when you get food in you, all of these things release dopamine, which is why you feel good, satisfied after you do them. Okay? So again, adolescents, they're seeking dopamine, but they often don't really think about whether the risks outweigh or the rewards outweigh the risks. Um, Adolescents tend to respond especially strongly to social rewards during activities. And again, it's because adolescents are so aware of their peers. They're seeking out that group interaction. They're seeking out romantic interactions. They're seeking out bonds with people. They're seeking out human experiences. We're human. This is built into our DNA to find friends, to find mates, to find food, to find experiences, to feel good, to seek rewards. And all of this releases neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, which is that bond. Again, we seek out sexual relationships because after we have sexual relationships, we have the feeling of being connected to people, which is oxytocin being released. Same thing with friendships. When you feel connected to someone, all of a sudden you're like, I love that person. I feel connected to you. We are friends. That is just oxytocin in your brain making you feel good. But you could also like feel it in your body, but again, is it really in your body, or is it just your brain putting that perception of how your body feels into your mind's eye? That's a conversation for another day. I'd be here all day talking about how you don't actually see the tree. You see how the brain puts the image of a tree in your mind's eye because you don't actually see the tree. You just see light. And then your brain interprets that light as a tree and then puts that into your brain. Okay, so not going to go off on that rant today. We're not in that psychology class. But again, with both dopamine and oxytocin engaged, it is no wonder that adolescents seek peers and excitement in their lives that could end up endangering them because they're seeking excitement, but they could do things that are dangerous. So we need to inform them of all the dangers in life and cross our fingers that our children can go in the world and stay safe. That's all I can hope for as a parent, okay? Because of all of the changes that occur in the brain during adolescence, the chances for abnormal development, including mental illness, start to arise now. And again, it's because your brain is creating that giant map. And how well organized is that map? What's the brain chemistry of the map? What are your experiences? How are they influencing the map? The map meaning the structure of your brain, which is responsible for creating all of the sensations that you experience, right? Like you take in stimuli and then you perceive that stimuli, but it's really your brain putting that perception into your head. So again, in fact, all 50% of all mental illnesses occur by the age of 14, and 75% of mental illnesses occur by 24. So you can really start to see where about 14 these things really start to come out. But again, how we define mental illness, again, it's a conversation for another day. It's all relative. But you start to see the susceptibility to it at this time because, again, there's a lot going on. The flood of emotions, but physical changes going on with your body, hormonal changes, sexual development, motivation levels and the type of motivation you're seeking, the social context, your experiences, trauma, abuse, all of these things have to be considered in a person's development, okay? Um, However, researchers have also focused on the highly adaptive qualities of the adolescent brain. Again, we're able to cope and be resilient at the same time. So again, just because we struggle in life at times, there is a way to still go out into the world and be resilient. Novelty seeking and risk taking can generate positive outcomes also, including meeting new people and seeking out new situations. Again, why does your brain want why does your, higher level functioning not kick in? Again, your brain kind of wants you to go out and do some stuff. It wants you to go challenge your abilities, to find out what you're capable of, to push the limits of it a little bit too, on top of seeking all the rewards. You have to test the boundaries. It's the only way you can really find your way around. You got to find out where the walls are and which ones you can push and which ones block you, okay? So separating from the family and moving into new relationships and different experiences are quite adaptive for adolescents in society. So again, this is a big time where our independence, our individualism is rising. We're going out, we're becoming autonomous. Hopefully we've mastered that stage. We're becoming industrious. We're developing all of our skills. Hopefully we've mastered that stage. Okay. So, interesting time. All right, so this will be good for the end of part 2. So again, you guys can take a break here, and then we'll conclude it with part 3 next. Thank you.